Hey everybody, this is Sara. I just wanted to take a moment to welcome you to episode number 5. I wanted to make sure that you had a pen and paper ready and that you also had access to hit the pause button now and then to jot down a few notes. You're definitely going to want to jot down some of these valuable takeaways on mental wellness. Enjoy. To Your Wise Self with Sara, the podcast that invites you to embark on a journey of self-discovery, growth, and transformation. Thank you for joining me, Sara, as I explore the profound wisdom that resides within each of us, waiting to be uncovered and embraced. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Over the last several years, I started to notice the many social media posts by my brother's childhood best friend, Dr. Jeff Buske. His messages regarding mental health indicated to me that he had been on a personal journey of growth. So I asked Jeff if he would be willing to share his journey from the perspective of men and mental health today. Welcome, Jeff.
Sara, thank you. It's so good to be here. So great to see you. And I'm super excited to kick this off today too. I can't wait.
It means the world to me to have you here. And as we were just talking about, we've known each other for about 40 years now.
Just a little bit of time.
Just a little bit of time. You've been in Texas and we've been up here in the Midwest. And while I know my brother's kept in close contact with you, I haven't had the same close contact, but I've been able to watch your journey a little bit on social media. Yeah. And so, maybe would you dive in and tell us a little bit more about yourself and about the journey you've been on?
It's interesting. Like right now, I do get to practice dentistry. I've been doing dentistry now for, 27 years. It's crazy to think that much time has actually flown by as well. And yeah, I live in Texas. I've got a wife and 3 children. My wife's name's Cammie, our daughter, Abby, she's 16, our oldest son, Dylan, he's 19, and our youngest, Maddox, who's 13. And I've also had this amazing opportunity to coach men inside of dentistry. And that was the result of just part of my personal journey too. And part of just uncovering a lot more of who I am and having this opportunity to really reveal new parts of me as new seasons progress in life. And I think that's one of the things that life is about. I think one of the purposes of life is about expansion. And so the older that I get, the more that I realize of how important it is for us to have amazing family, amazing people that we love and that love us in our life, and have incredible adventures and not to lose the fun along the way. For a long time, I had lost the fun in my life, and it wasn't always the cheery panda bears and unicorns and happy fruit. And those things can exist, but it's rare. I think that unfortunately, a lot of life these days, that joy gets kind of deconditioned out of us. So I feel like there is a unique opportunity that if we have the ability to really sit back and listen and to take an opportunity to figure out and be really radically honest with where we're at in today's world with ourselves, and be radically honest with where we want to go, now we have a shot to actually get there.
And I think that the expansion part is just so important. You and I were even before this talking about, kind of all these forces that we have outside of us and inside of us, maybe even working against each other at points, and coming in contact with that and understanding what it is that we need to make ourselves expand and grow into the person that we're meant to be. So I'm curious if you wouldn't mind going back to that time in your life when things felt really low and dark.
In our profession, especially in dentistry, there's this darkness that just doesn't get talked about too often. And I would just say, even outside of dentistry, I think just even sometimes with men in general. So I'm going to be curious to see how individuals listening can relate to this. I'll take you back to 2016, and it was what I would consider to be a fight that changed my whole life. And it was a fight with my wife. And so let me give you some of the backstory to this. A couple of years previous to that, I had decided to open up a scratch dental practice. I had my main practice in Granbury, Texas, where I live, and I was practicing in that practice 4 days a week. And then I decided to open a scratch practice, which means that no patients, no nothing, build it from the ground up. I opened that 52 miles away. I was looking at creating a culture from a distance. I was looking at operating and training my team. I was looking at working with doctors, which a lot of times felt like doctor daycare. I had about every issue under the sun that you could imagine. It was interesting because I could produce like crazy in my practice, and I was a good producer. But to build something from scratch was a whole new animal. I made a lot of mistakes, and also didn't necessarily have set aside enough working capital for marketing and everything of that nature. In dentistry, in dental school, we don't get a whole lot of training on marketing and advertising. And these are some things that you've got to figure out. And in this practice, like I said, I made about every mistake possible. I had one team member embezzle money. I had all kinds of things that happened, but I was doing everything. I was doing everything from figuring out the marketing, the advertising, managing everything, paying the bills, running the team, trying to create a culture, taking care of the doctors, and then also getting good enough patient flow in. And what I also realized is that, sometimes the doctors say a little bit more than what they can actually provide for care. And so what I ended up finding myself doing was then going over there on Fridays and me doing more complex dentistry. So what I essentially did is I gave myself another job, which was very difficult. And at that time, as a man, I didn't really have a lot of tools in my tool belt to manage any of the stress. I felt like my entire life was then just wrapped up inside of dentistry. Like I was working on that practice every hour of the day and make it successful so that I didn't fail. There was something in me that was just not going to let me fail, but I was sacrificing everything else to do that. It was driving me, but what I was doing was driving everything else away. And so when you have that type of stress, it's like the equivalent of putting down the gas pedal and just never letting it off. And at some point, something's going to blow, and that's where you burn out. And when you start to burn out, you just start to hate what you're doing. And that's where I was at. I was at a point where I was starting to hate dentistry. I was hating what I was doing. I definitely didn't have any fun or enjoyment in my life. Everything was just about dentistry. I was completely disconnected from my kids. I had zero connection with God at that point in time in my life. I was disconnected from my wife. Our intimacy was at an all-time low. I was also deconditioning my body every day. And in an unhealthy way, what I would do is I would just drink alcohol every day so I could sit there and see if I could just numb the pain, just so I could get a break, just so I could forget for a little bit. And of course, then that just turns into like, I don't want to get up and work out. I don't want to get up and take care of my body. I'm already making bad choices. So if I'm already making these bad choices, then what's the point? I can go ahead and eat unhealthy. I don't have to worry about working out. It's just a landslide. It's gradually and then suddenly. And that's the way that things happen. I was angry every day. And this is not the easiest things to talk about or to admit, but this is the way that I was. And I would take that anger and I would suppress it and push it down and push it down and push it down. Because really kind of as a kid, I was taught, you just don't show your emotions a lot. You don't be too over exuberant because you better calm down, or you better have enough exuberance or else you're too melancholy. You just weren't taught as a boy or as a man to be able to have all this expression of your full emotions. So I would just take and just push all this down. And that's like, to me, it's like the equivalent of taking a giant beach ball and just pushing it underwater and taking it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And at some point, when you let that beach ball go, it's going to erupt up with such tremendous force. And when you take anger and do that, when it erupts, it turns into rage. And so I would come home, and this is, again, not the easiest thing to say, but I would operate basically as an emotional terrorist in my home. I was not the best person to be around for my wife, for my kids, anybody. And so coming back to that Friday night, my wife and I both had numerous bottles of wine to drink, probably at least 3, maybe if not 4. So we were really in a great fight, and we were really saying what was on our minds. And it was spicy, and it was about kids, and it was about money, and it was about everything. And I was laying into her and she was laying into me. And then her words just stopped me in my tracks, where she said, Jeff, I didn't sign up for this shit. And I just sat there, and she said, the kids and I walk around here every day on eggshells. I sat there and I couldn't even say anything because it was the truth. And that's the reality that I created. I sat there and went to sleep that night, and I was laying no less than 18 inches from her, and I felt completely disconnected, and I felt guilty. I felt ashamed, and I felt very alone. And I think that's one of the things in dentistry is that there's a lot of feeling alone. I think that's also one of the reasons that there's still a very high suicide rate in our profession too, and depression and sedation and divorce too. But I remember laying there that night, and I just remember thinking, God, we're operating like roommates with rings instead of a happy, loving, married couple. And I just sat there and I prayed. I prayed to God and I said, please help me. Please help my family. I know that I created this, but I needed to have a way out. And so that was how I went to sleep sleep that night. And it was probably one of the worst nights and worst feelings that I can tell you in my life. It's interesting how God answers your prayers. A week later, I had something come across my Facebook feed, and it was from this guy named Garrett J. White, who ran a program called Wake Up Warrior. I clicked on it, and his messaging was just, wow, this guy's talking right to me. And even my wife, could hear it, and she said, who is that? I said, I don't know, but I said, I feel like he's talking right to me. And in his ad, he had something you could click, and it ended up being like about a 45-minute documentary. And so my wife and I actually sat in bed and watched this whole documentary. It was just like he was inside of my head, thinking my thoughts, telling me exactly what his experience was, but it was also playing out through my real world too. We got done watching it. My wife turned to me and she said, you're going to go do that, aren't you? That experience. And I said, I think I need to. And she said, I think you do too. So I signed up for something called Warrior Week. The best way that I can describe Warrior Week will be like if you took Tony Robbins and combined that with Navy SEALs Hell Week, and then took Tyler Durden from Fight Club and you put all them together and they had a baby. That's what Warrior Week was like.
Wow.
And it was intense. It was intense. Yeah. I remember the beat down started about 1:00 on the first day. And then at 2:47 in the morning, we're still in the Pacific Ocean doing all kinds of evolutions. And, I remember the fact of why am I here? There for myself and then for my family, because I knew that I had to transform and change. With that, I had to be broken down mentally, emotionally, physically, and then rebuilt. Out of that process, it shifted everything from the way that I operated and the way that I showed up. It really shifted my whole entire way of being and the way in which I viewed life, the way in which I viewed my marriage, the way in which I viewed my relationship with my kids and my opportunities that I had to lead at work. And I remember one thing that my mentor, Garrett, said, he said, if the king doesn't rise, then the kingdom dies. And that was etched in my brain forever. And I thought, man, I have not been operating like a king at all. I had given up my crown. And so when I got back home, it's easy when you're at a conference or it's easy when you're at a program or a seminar to come back all fired up and excited. But then it's about creating the long game, consistency of action. My wife was happy, obviously, with the changes that she could see right away. But I know in her mind, she was thinking, okay, how long is this going to last? Is this going to last? Or is this just going to be another part of the roller coaster ride? Take that and you fast forward now to 2023, and we move into our dream home that we designed and built together. Our kids are thriving, got great relationships with them. I'm present in their lives. God is back in my life in probably the most profound way. My body is fit and weaponized. I feel more energetic than I did in my 40s, and my business is thriving. I get to work 3 days a week in my practice, doing the dentistry that I love, getting to see the patients that I love, doing the type of complex care that I love to enjoy to do. And then the rest of the time I get to coach men inside of dentistry, and I get to live a life with my family and my friends that I truly cherish and get to create experiences and adventures. And I think that's a big part of life now that I'm like, man, I'm so happy that I went through what I did, because I think that the gifts are inside of the darkness and you won't find the light until you go through the dark. Mm-hmm. And so, but we have to have the willingness and the courage to face the darkness in order to find that light.
So moving to hear you go through that whole story and share the downward spiral all the way to the upward spiral. And that was one of the things I was thinking when you were talking about it. I was like, what was the purpose behind this beatdown? But it makes sense to kind of just take and break everything down, because obviously that had been built to a point, and it needed to be broken down and rebuilt in a different way. And I think a couple of things that were coming up for me. Well, first of all, I would like to ask what it means to you for your body to be weaponized.
For me, that means being functionally and physically fit. Like, I love to be able to just go out, pick up the football and go run around with my kids. I love to be able to walk out my front door, throw on my running shoes and be able to jog 4 miles without any type of problem. I love being able to go pick up weights. I love being able to do flexibility training. I love for my body to be operable and to give me the energy that's required in order to make it through my day and to also be injury free. Mm-hmm. That's a huge component of just having a body that supplies me with the energy that I need, that's functionally fit. To know that, hey, if my house was on fire, I could physically carry carry out my entire family. Not all at one time, but I could do that.
Right.
And that I'm not going to be out of breath going from the couch to the refrigerator. What I mean by weaponized is I mean the fact that it gives me the energy that's required in order to pull off the things that I do.
That makes sense. And that's your physical part of your physical part of this journey and this practice for you. The other part to me that stood out, and this kind of starts to get into the emotional part of masculine energy. So I think the other important thing to communicate with the listeners today is when I think about masculine energy, I think about this tough guy attitude, this tough guy who's got to be able to like persevere through anything and not really have any kind of give to that. And so I'm curious, I'm guessing that masculine energy means a little something different to you.
For me, I'll say this because I think masculinity has also kind of taken a beating also too over the last number of years with toxic masculinity and all kinds of different labels and things. And when you really look at it from a perspective, like I look at part of my role as masculine leader is, look, I want to create a space of safety and security and provision at home. And I think what my wife is looking for is for that security and to feel safe and to feel this open space to make her own decisions. And masculinity to me is, it doesn't come from force. That is that big bravado that I think that's false. I think true masculinity is an invitation. I'm inviting my wife in. My container is big enough to house you and any of your craziness and any of our kids' craziness and any of that. And you get to deal with my craziness as well, because we all have a little bit of crazy inside of us, but it's having the container and the space to be able to hold that space and to do that. I think the biggest thing to take away from real true masculinity is it's delivered in a way that is through an invitation. One of the things too in my story and looking back at that, and just like I said, the physical and emotional and the beat down that was then at that time, I needed that. And what I realized, and this is a different time today too. I don't think that that's needed today. And what we're proving and with what I do and the way that we coach and what we teach and with the tools and everything is it's not necessarily required to go through that same type of physical beat down and everything else that we did at that time. And the guys that I get to train and that I get to coach and I get to lead and teach, they're getting tremendous results and cutting down the time tremendously because they have a path and we don't have to go through and have them go through that whole beat down. And that's an important aspect of it because, there'll be people out there going, man, that sounds great, but I don't want to put myself through that.
Well, just like you've evolved, the program sounds like it's evolved as well. And
yes.
And I think that from my yoga therapy background, the thing that I am hearing also is that we have patterns in our body, literally deeply rooted in our energy fields, in our fascia, in our breath, every aspect of our body down to the cells of our body. So really your experience is taking that and again, regenerating it and rebuilding it in a different way.
I completely agree.
You've talked about your physical body. We've talked about this masculine energy and maybe how that relates to emotional. What other types of tools and resources you're utilizing to help you?
One of the things that we look at and that you and I had a little bit of a conversation too before we kick this off. So we do something called the Core Four. And this is the way that I look at creating, I call stacking W's every day, which is stacking my wins every day. So essentially I keep 8 simple promises to myself every day. And it is simple. It's not complex. We have 4 main areas in our life or 4 domains, if you want to think of it. And it's body, like we were talking about. It's being, which is our spirituality and our purpose. And it's balance. So our wife and our kids or people in your life, that relationships that you love or that love you or that are meaningful to you. And then our business. So in this case would be for me, our dental practice and our bank accounts. So if you look at each of those 4 domains, we've got a couple subdomain categories for each one. So it's 8 simple promises. So my body, I get up and I train every day. And then I also have had a green smoothie every day since 2016. And that changed my life with how I operate. That's body. My being, meditation started to come into my world at that time. And it's funny because I had all kinds of different thoughts and stories about meditation. And now it is one of the biggest non-negotiables in my life. But I realized how much meditation has impacted my life to the point of when I first started doing it, my wife would say, have you meditated today? Because if I didn't, she could tell a difference. And it was that big of a deal. But the first time that I tried to meditate, I had this story in my head that like my whole mind had to be blank and clear. And after about 20 seconds and thinking about like a sports car or something else, I was like, oh shit, this is just not for me. I can't meditate. I had this whole thing. I was like, I don't know where that story came from, but it was just one of those ones that I was like, oh, yep, I can't meditate. And I came to realize that there's so many different forms of meditation. And we can do ascension, we can do breath work. The only wrong way to meditate is to not meditate, is what I've come down to. And it's very simple nowadays. There are so many apps out there. You can even do guided meditation. Even like if I've had a hard day at the office, like with work and very stressful day, I will pull over on the way home, take and set 5-minute timer on my phone and just breathe for 5 minutes. And it just shifts my whole perspective before I come walk in the door with my wife and kids. Some of those little things are tremendous as far as the difference goes. My body, like I said, working out, getting training, green smoothie. My being, that's going to be meditation and then memoirs. And so I'm journaling every day too. And I used to have this thought process and pattern about journaling. I was like, I looked at it and did some of it when I was younger a little bit. And then I didn't really care about it. But now I look at it from the point of like, I started to care about my legacy, and I started to care about like, man, I want my kids at some point in time when I'm gone to be able to see like, what was I thinking at this time? What was I experiencing? What were the feelings and the thoughts that I was expressing? So I just started to think of it even from a legacy standpoint. So when I journal now, I journal with those things in mind. But I've also noticed that there's this amazing thing when you journal is I write very different than I speak. A lot of times I can speak and I can speak really fast and I get excited and all these things. But journaling is one of those things that slows me down. It slows down the neural pathways, and it lets me think differently and gets out of my head and gets into my heart. To me, that's like one of the true connections with God, is just getting out of my head, opening the channel of my heart, and then just letting it flow. So we got body, being, and I've got balance. And so in balance, I'm looking at how can I do something very simple that creates connection. And it's looking at making daily deposits into the people in my life that matter to me. So that can be with my spouse, that can be with my children, that can be with friends or other family. And what I mean by deposits is that it can be as simple as I pick up my phone and I send a text message. And a lot of times I'm going to use the words honor, love, or appreciate. I'm going to think about that when I'm sending that message. Or it could be a quick audio text, or it could be a quick video. Hey, babe, I just want to tell you how much I love you and how much I appreciate you and how much I'm just honored that you're my wife, and that I can't believe the experiences that we get to engage with as a couple. And I'm just so happy to be married to you. Thanks for being my wife. Click, send, off. Something that simple. And so doing that with two people, that's my deposits. And then in my business and my bank accounts, what I'm doing there is I'm taking and I'm either reading something or listening to a podcast or listening to a book on Audible or consuming a video that is going to take and give me a pearl. And so now when I read very different. I used to read from the point that I want to read till I just reach the end of the book. And that's my accomplishment. Now I read for revelation. So I read until I get that pearl or that perspective. Then I'm going to take and look at that and go, okay, how can I now take that one pearl or that one perspective or that one takeaway? And how can I apply that in my life? Or how can I apply that, especially in my business? Now I'm going to teach that either to my team, or I'm going to teach that to my docs, or whatever it may be. Because now if I got to teach it, I'm going to know it at a different level. And that just burns it in the neural pathway at a different place. So that's one of the major tools that I've utilized that has made tremendous differences in my whole entire life. How I show up, how I operate as a husband, how I operate as a father, how I operate as a leader with my team and my dental practice, how I operate with my patients, my communication there, how I operate with my body and what I choose to consume and put into it. You know, I look at food more as fuel and not entertainment. And so it's just a different way of being. And that's one of the best tools that I could share with your listeners that has really dramatically impacted my life. You know, we've got 5 very simple frameworks that we train on, and that's probably one of the biggest ones. And that framework is the way that I look at putting myself, like I said, stacking W's, but really what that comes down to is looking at creating power for myself every single day. Because what I realized, and like, man, I was leaking power all the time in my life. And by power, there's a lot of connotations that can come with that word. And so if we just define it as the capacity to do, that I'm just creating a greater capacity for myself every day. So I'm not necessarily relying on Starbucks or my lucky underwear or my brand new tennis shoes to make it through the day. I'm actually going to win the day before I ever walk into my practice, before I have interactions with my family. Now I've already filled up my cup. And this is something I really want your listeners to get, is that for a long time, I ran around and my cup was not full. It was mostly empty. Or if it was even half full and I give something to you, now our relationship becomes transactional. I need to get something back because otherwise I'm even more depleted. When I take care of me first and my cup is full, now I can pour into you all day. And now I can create that space. And now I've got that energy. Now I've got that vitality that just allows us to express that and to really, truly be present and feel that. And there's a big difference in there. So the best way that you can take care of others is to take care of yourself first. That is absolutely for sure. And the other thing that I've always learned is that kids are always watching. They're always listening. I would say most people that are close in your life are always watching and always listening. So if you want to shape how they start to see things, how they start to operate, you lead by example. Like our kids eat so much healthier now. They choose water as opposed to soda. They choose to have healthier foods because they also know, hey, if I want to operate as an athlete, I've got to look at putting good fuel into my body. Yeah. So they start to see these things, and these are things that they start to show up in your world. It happens over time.
And I think that's an important message to also be emphasized too. How long did it take for you to make this shift and make these changes and bring about this daily routine?
Man, well, I came back and I'm an implementer. So put it this way first, if I'm operating at a scale of like 1 to 10, and like, let's say I was at a 1, it's very easy to go, okay, life's pretty shitty right now. I'm going to give up 1. And this looks a whole lot better over here. I'm going to let go of 1 so I can get to 4 or 5. So I'm going to take and implement what my coaches are telling me like right away. But to make that become habit takes a little while. I think that there's this progression, meaning that there's a concept or idea that we take. And in order to start to put that into play, then we've got to create some consistency around that. And usually that first comes about by creating some type of routine. And we've all heard about having a morning routine and those things. And routine to me is like, I'm forcing myself to do something. I'm creating a checklist so I can do it, but it's not something that I've got to be a habit yet. And then the next step after the routine is then creating the habit. And a habit's like, man, now that I've seen some of the results. Ooh, this feels good. I'm seeing different changes in my world. I'm starting to see some of the results or some of the fruit within the month of being back in the way that I was showing up and operating with my kids. Like at that time, I was almost out the door before my kids were all the way up and ready for school. I was thinking, well, how can I even just connect with them in the morning? And so what I would do is I would sit there and they all had their little breakfast space along this little bar table where they'd all eat. So part of the way I would connect with them would be I would write on a 3x5 card and I'd look up a famous quote from somebody and I would write it. And I would say, who said this? And I would write a nice little message like, have a great day, Abby. Have a great day, Dylan, or whatever it was be. Love you. Same thing with Maddox. So on their way to school, then they'd be figuring out like, who said that? It was a way that I had some connection before I was having to leave to go to the office, even if they weren't up. So it's about how we can be creative. Within a month's time, I was already starting to create some results. And then I could start to create a habit where I was seeing like, wow, people are noticing the way that I'm showing up is different. So it fed into me wanting to create that habit. And then I think from habit, it goes into this is how I am. And this is how I'm going to choose to be because now I'm really seeing the fruits of the labor. And it goes away from like, this is something that I do to now this is something of who I am. Like I look at like my core 4, that's just part of who I am. It's part of my way of being. It's not something I have to get up and think about doing every day. It's like those 8 simple promises are just part of who I am. By the end of that first year, I was completely unrecognizable to the human being that I was before. And so that type of transformation is evident, and it becomes evident in the results that you obtain. Like I said, recreating connection and intimacy with my wife, having the ability to be present with my kids, putting down the damn cell phone and just connecting with them, figuring out what's going on on in their world and being interested in that and playing the games with them and just wanting to be there with them, being and having the desire to take care of my body. And for me, reinstating a connection with God, that was big. I got divorced in 2012. At that time, growing up Catholic, the Catholic Church said you can no longer attend communion. And I was like, man, that's like the church just giving me the middle finger. I was like, okay. And then I chose just to kind of walk away. And, when I turned my back on the church and on God, then life really didn't go well. And so this allowed me to come back and start to have God actually back in my life again. That has been a tremendous difference for me too. And whatever it is for you, I'm not saying it has to be God. It could be the universe. It could be whatever it is that you believe in. But I do believe that we have to have some type of higher purpose beyond ourselves that pulls us forward.
Absolutely.
And that's really what I believe in.
You have covered so much great information and shared with us the depths of your experience and your transformation from your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual transformation. I mean, super powerful over an extended period of time. I mean, you talked about from 2016 to 2024. Maybe take a step back for those people that might be listening and going, this just feels overwhelming or whatever it is to them that they might be feeling right in this moment. Do you still have days that
Gosh. Yeah. Where things don't go great. Absolutely. We're all human and we all screw up and we all drift is what I say. We all drift. And unfortunately, some people drift for years and other people drift for decades. But when I have a drift, it's much easier to recognize and then it's easier to course correct now. Am I perfect every day? Hell no. I'll be the first to tell you that. Do I screw up? Yes. Do I make mistakes? All the time. Do I have perfect interaction with my wife? No. We collide, but we've learned to have collisions also in a healthy way. And we've learned to be able to express ourselves too. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to have collisions. I think in any type of relationship, when you have growth, there is going to be friction there because one person grows and then you have to have the other one grow. And then one person grows and then the other grows. So there is friction in that growth and that happening. If it's like this and you look at like a marriage is 50-50, I think that's wrong. Marriage is 100-100, 100% of me, 100% of you. And in that nature, there's going to be definitely collision and growth that has to happen and friction. Sometimes we outgrow somebody and sometimes we outgrow relationships. And that's the reality. And like I said, I am absolutely human. I have bad days, but the key is taking and acknowledging that, as I said before. And a big part of that is being in integrity and having the ability to be radically truthful myself and looking in the mirror and saying, okay, this is what's going on, and looking at the facts and examining that and looking at the results and then looking at my feelings around it and then saying, okay, what's the story that's gotten me here? And then what's going to get me where I want to go? I think one of the best things to look at is just having the ability to self-examine. Here's something very simple. If you want to have a different future, then you've got to create a new past. And what I mean by that is the only way to create a new past is by doing something radically different today. My bad days, my off days and things of that nature, then I got to look at that and go, okay, how long do I want to sit in this? And then what do I want to do about it? Because it's up to me, because I'm the one that's creating that. Again, this was a process for me that has been a long time unpacking. And the whole point of it all is just start. Pick just one area of life where you're like, I know I need to radically change that and take the best next step. That's all you need to do to start. That's it. Whatever that looks like for you.
Giving that next best step in one area makes it feel achievable and that there's something that people can start today. They don't even have to wait or find a program or whatever it is. People are out there looking for resources and tools and looking for people like you. I know you're a mentor through your program and on social media. If you wouldn't mind sharing with the listeners a few resources that we can plug into the notes and also a way to be able to connect with you should they want to follow you on social media.
Sure. Absolutely. Man, I think one of the best ways that you can look at some things, like I love some of the different podcasts that are available. There's so many great ways to look at getting some growth out of there. I kind of geek out sometimes with some of the health stuff. I love Ben Greenfield's podcast. I think he's fantastic to listen to. One of the books that I would highly, highly recommend, it was by a plastic surgeon, Maxwell Maltz. He was one of the first plastic surgeons in the country, and it's called Psycho-Cybernetics. And he talks about theater of the mind. And if you want to look at really starting to create some powerful stories, because we talked a little bit today, we touched a little bit about on belief and your identity identity, this is starting to look at how can you really create an identity that you can live into. I think it was Tony Robbins who said that we will absolutely live into who it is that we believe ourselves to be. I definitely agree with that because, when people are say like, oh, I'm just a smoker. Well, if you continue to tell yourself that, then you will always be a smoker. If you look at it saying up until now, I was a smoker, but now I'm choosing something different. Because when you start to see yourself in a different way and you start to believe that and you start to create that as an identity, then you live into that. So when you look at it, maybe some of you guys out here can relate to this. If you have taken and lost the same 10 to 20 pounds over the last 10 years, on and off and on and off and on and off on a roller coaster ride, it's not that the diet failed. It's just the fact of our identity just needs to shift because how we see ourselves and who we believe ourselves to be will radically change how we operate and change our actions on how we operate. And it doesn't mean that like, I don't look at and go, oh gosh, I'd love to have a piece of chocolate cake. It doesn't mean that at all. We're looking at choosing what are our daily choices, again, that create consistency that allow us to then reach our long-term goals. So it's then living into that identity.
I think the other component too, that as you're talking is community and connection.
Yes.
And so we can listen to the podcast, we can listen, or read books. What would you also encourage in that connection and community piece as well?
Thank you for bringing that up, Sarah, because I think that's so important today is look at in your space or whatever it is that fits for you. And there's going to be so many different things in your life because it could be as simple as finding a community that loves to go out and walk, finding a community that loves to go hike, or finding a community that loves to go mountain bike or loves to do books, or there can be so many different things or gardening, whatever your interests are. Find a community that you can feel a calling towards or that you feel a belonging to, because there's power inside of a community. There's power inside of the community because there's this collective genius that's found there. And I've noticed this with coaching is that I can do one-on-one coaching and get some amazing results. But here's the thing that I've also noticed about group coaching is very dynamic in the essence that, man, there is this power in the community that it can't be tapped into in a one-on-one type of scenario. And it's like I said, it's that collective consciousness of genius that gets brought about because I might be talking to Bob about one thing and then all of a sudden Bill will say, oh my gosh, this is what stirred that up for me. And then he says something that I would never have thought about. Now you have this whole whirlwind of information going around that you can take and apply and bring into your world and be like, whoa, that would never have been found outside of community. And there's also support in community. And it gives us a place, as I was talking about, like when I was going through my dark times, there wasn't a place for me. There wasn't a place that I knew that existed where I could feel like I had the opportunity to talk about the things that I was feeling and the emotions that I was feeling. So when you can find a community and a safe space to be, go and be with that and be a part of it and express yourself, that's where a lot of truth comes and that's where healing comes. And I think that just having that ability to have that connection with people that are like-minded is powerful. We crave connection. We crave relationship as human beings. We crave that so much. And especially in a world that's so disconnected. When you look and 90% of the people are on their phones like this, we're so disconnected. And you know what? If it doesn't exist, guess what? You can be one of the first then to create it. Go create it. Bring it into your world. You can follow me on Instagram. It's dr.jeffbuske. Dr. Jeff Buske. I'm on there usually almost every day doing some type of live, and I record, I say for productivity in dentistry and in life. But the truth is that a lot of that message can be applied anywhere from anybody. So if there's where you're looking at some of those little shifts in your world, you may hear a couple dental stories wrapped around it, but if you can extract the lesson out of there, this is free content. I also have a quick podcast myself called Jumpstart with Jeff. And a lot of times that's very consumable. It's usually, 5 to 8 minute little clips. I usually have a nice little story wrapped into that, like what happened, why is it important? Sometimes they're a little bit longer, but kind of the what, why lesson apply is my formula that I love to have out there. So you can take take something and apply it in your life. And so you can check that out too. But those are some free resources in which I can then look at speaking into your world. And then if you're a dentist out there, then you can check me out at Limitless Dentist Academy. This has been fantastic. And I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to be on here. And I hope that through some of my story and what I've shared has created some value for your listeners. And hopefully you guys have found something useful that you can take out of it today and apply in your world.
Thank you so much. It has been just such a joy to meet with you today, Jeff. And I'm so grateful for the time and energy and opportunity for you to share your intentional transformation that you have made. And I know that you're going to be changing lives of my listeners, but I know you're out there changing lives of the many people who are around you and listening to your message. So thank you so much for being here. What an inspiring episode we had today. So grateful for Jeff being willing to be vulnerable and share his story with us. Please stay tuned for the next episode of Your Wise Self with Sara, where we will dive into self-compassion practices. Until then, take care.